Hello, my name is Janelle Cooper. Welcome to episode 2 of Stories for Change, Food Edition. We are excited to have you back with us virtually for our first ever stories. Well, actually, it's the second Stories for Change program. I'm happy to introduce you to one of my colleagues, Sage Hubbard, who is the daughter of an urban farmer. She's a mother, artist, poet, educator, curator, engaged scholar, and organizer. She is on contract with the museum's education department, working on programming for our Food for the People exhibit. If you haven't had a chance to come see it, please do so. We're open Tuesday through Saturday, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. Sage, take it away.
Thank you so much, Janelle. Greetings, everyone. I'm really excited to be here today. This is the year of food justice at the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. And we decided that this would be our theme for the exhibition calendar years ago, long before the pandemic, when equity, food, and food workers were shown to everyone right now to be essential and on the front lines. All people and cultures tell stories. When you change the story, you change the world. That's the point of the Stories for Change program. See, even museum exhibitions are all about stories. How and what we eat, how we cook it, how we get our food has stories behind it. And telling these often untold stories from often unheard people can make a difference. It's actually one of the most universal forms of human connection and the most transformative and impactful. This is why we are so delighted to introduce you tonight to our Stories for Change series, starting with this food edition and a series of 7 local homegrown storytellers, many of whom this is their first time telling stories and are connected to our Food for the People Eating and Activism in Greater Washington, DC exhibit that's on view right now. So tonight we're about to share 2 stories and storytellers, and you'll hear from them directly about why they talk about food, how food matters to them. And tonight we're featuring New Healing Arts and Naijha Speaks. I'll put their symbols and their connections so you can get connected with them on Instagram and other social media channels right away. And we're really interested in people who discovered the true value of healthy, unprocessed foods and then made this passion into their careers. And after we watch their performances, then we'll kind of interview them and get a behind the scenes and deeper insight into their perspective. Our theme for tonight is becoming a pharmacist, or a farmer and medicinal healer. Did you know that 46% of US land is used for grazing, livestock, growing crops, and yet the US still imports 15% of its food from other countries, and 13% of people in DC have diet-related chronic illnesses like diabetes or heart disease. Right now, residents of Ward 7 are 6 times more likely to die from diabetes than residents of Ward 2. So these folks today are going to talk more about how food is medicine, and we need to understand more deeply what it is and why we eat what we eat in order to be healthier. And you'll learn much more when you come to our exhibition. So we'll start with the micro level of personal stories, and we're actually recording tonight into a podcast so we can share this with many, many more people around the world. So without further ado, we have a video story from Gio Edwards, and he is an educator and healing artist who practices and encompasses herbalism, art therapy, gardening, and community acupuncture. He's the creator of New Healing Arts Garden, a teaching garden, and owner of New Grain and Pestle, an herb apothecary that sells value added products and herbal teas, tinctures, extracts, and oil infusions. New Healing Arts Garden has been an incubator for his studio and healing arts practices. Geo often facilitates plant walks and workshops on numerous topics ranging from ecology to the five elements and creative writing to herb cultivation and art as social action. He loves storytelling and building with his wife and sons about all things music, genealogy, and food. So without further ado, here is Geo's story.
How y'all doing? All right. So, we had just come off of a long string of complications with asthma with my second son, Yakalo, who was 23 at the time. He had been experiencing shortness of breath, and there was asthma, and over the course of a week or so, it led to a situation where he was admitted to the pediatric intensive care unit at Inova Fairfax Hospital for 12 days. It was just a frightening experience. The first night that we were there, we were in the room, and right next door to us was a family whose young one who didn't make it. And for whatever reason, whatever complication that came about, we know that that child passed, and we woke up the next day and our child was here. And so we're there, and it was just a very rough night. I remember waking up, and at this point, it's 9 days later. He had been intubated, for 9 days, and I slept on the love chair next to the hospital bed. My wife slept at home. We were alternating shifts at the time, so I would stay during the day, and she would come, or I would stay at night, and then she would come during the day. And this was just our routine for making sure that we're able to do work and, be able to get, by while being in the hospital with Yakalo. But with him being intubated for 9 days, one of the biggest things, or the issue that was for us, was what would we feed him? Because when you have the intubations, when he's hooked up to the IVs and the medications, you're not able to eat. And that was one of the questions that came up for us. We were thinking, how would we nourish him? How would we, help him to recover? What would be the things that we would offer him that would allow him to get back to his fiery, resilient self that he was? Now, mind you, he was just 23 months at the time, about to turn 2, but probably the most outgoing, person that he is to this day. And so it was just a very critical point. It was time where the doctor came in and they told us that, okay, we're ready to remove the tubes. Once the tubes were removed, we get the menu, and I began to look down and look at the menu. And so I'll give you a little bit of a backstory. So Yakalo happens to be one of many kids who were born, I would say, in my observation, post year 2000-ish, that have just this explosion of food allergies. I just remember growing up in, it was like one kid who had peanut allergies in class. And, now we find it very common, with school, when you get kids in pre-K, no peanuts are allowed in school at all. And so we have dairy, just all the different type of allergies that are there. And so as I'm looking through the menu, I see, okay, cheeseburgers, pizza, lasagna. All right, and so I'm looking through and end up looking through the entire menu only to realize that in a 4-page menu, there are only 2 items that he could actually eat. It was the French fries and steamed broccoli. I'm like, okay, we're gonna start with that for now. So I pick up the phone. I call. Any of you have ever been in a hospital or been in an experience of having to call, it's usually a phone number, just you push 0, and it, dials you down to the kitchen. So push 0, room number. Okay. I hear the gum chewing. I'm like, okay. I hear the juicy fruit or Charleston chew, whatever, this person is eating. They're like, okay. So I give the room number and I say, okay, is it possible to have this minus the bread, or do we know the ingredients of the bread? And we went, in literally a 5-minute conversation of going through ingredients of the items and couldn't find anything. We ended up going with the French fries for then. I would actually do some research and find out that coconut, and the young coconut would be a young thing to be able to give, and especially, for children. And so I went to Whole Foods later on and purchased a $8 young coconut, and was, right, and got my machete, cut the top off of it, and scooped out the jelly. And so this was one of the things that we were able to give him early on at that point. But it really just had me thinking about the fact that we were in this institution with, practitioners. They're all here. They want to serve. They get into this work, and we have just overall this place that's here for serving and for healing specifically. And we have this menu that for those who have food allergies, who can't even receive nourishment as part of the process of healing, who need to eat. And so that really just struck a chord with me. We have this place where it's just, that you just want to get the best for your family, and we weren't able to get that. And that really just sent me, on a very, very, very interesting path of, reflecting on my own past, my own family, and just our experience, in my own experience of traveling south, sometimes 2-3 times a year, where I would just be around family. We just ate everything. Just from traveling down south, being around family on holidays, whether that was Juneteenth, MLK Day, birthdays, pretty much every Sunday, where everything was centered around food and everyone being able to eat. And so, later on, after him being discharged, this would be something that was part of our path, in every space that we would really go is even to this day, just being able to, okay, we can't go there. So there's places that really as a family, we've never been able to enjoy as a whole. Like, myself and my wife, we can go places, but being able to have that type of experience of going out with the family is actually, up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago, very few options of places, with the exception of some of the vegan places. But even some of the vegan, there's nuts or some things that are in the meals that would be a challenge sometimes. So we're out of the hospital now, and I'm just thinking about what are some of the ways that I can connect to my own food pathways. And so that will set me on, the journey of wanting to plant my own garden. And so, about a year after the time from that hospital experience, I planted my own garden. I planted my first green beans, planted my first tomatoes. There was collard greens, and the list began to go on and on. And from that, I embarked on this path, and I found herbs. And just going out into my yard and starting with the vegetables and looking at every green thing that's growing, and I just had this curiosity to just learn and figure out, okay, what is that growing? What is this? Is it helpful? Does it have a benefit? What is this plant? And that journey just took me each day, and the days became weeks. I ended up studying to become an herbalist and actually become a naturalist. So yes, I'm the weird person that if you see me out touching a tree, I'm doing research. Don't call the police. You see me? I've actually, facilitated plant walks, and so my work now encompasses a lot of doing plant walks. And so that, that work of getting into the herbalism and growing the foods exposed me to acupuncture and moxibustion and then the dietary food ways, which brought me back to my own ancestral food ways. And so, like I said, now I do that same work. I'm a herbalist. I plant gardens. I manage gardens. I teach families how to connect with land and how to identify plants and use those plants and or foods to heal their families. And it all started with that experience from not being able to find foods in the hospital. So looking out into the world and my yard and nature and everywhere around me to see what are the things that we can use to nourish them. So one day, at my local organic market, and I see that there's a table here. There's some pots with some vegetables. I see tomatoes. I see some raspberries. I see blueberries. There's herbs on the table. I see lavender, oregano. There's some thyme. And I see this small pot that has a fig sapling in it. And seeing that fig sapling on that tree took me to an experience of being in my grandparents' home in Indianola, Mississippi. Like I said, we would go there 2 to 3 times a year because my parents are from the Delta. My parents grew up on farms, and myself and my siblings were first generation kids off the farm and raised in the city. And so that fig tree just took me to that experience of running around, being in the yard, the fig tree, there's magnolia trees, there's chickens everywhere. We're out shooting BB guns, and just the whole experience of being out in the country, things you can't really do in the city, but if you're in the country, you can do that. And it just took me, to this fig jam that my grandma G-Mama would make. And so this fig jam came from the fig trees that G-Papa grew, and it was just this connection and their own synergy from the magic that he did out in the yard and on his farm and in his garden spaces, and how he brought that home, and then the alchemy and what she did with all the things that he grew, and then coming from them having 11 children and hundreds of grandchildren, and we all were there all times of year and just being able to feed and just watching the magic between them. And that fig tree really just brought me back to that experience. And so now I've gone and I've planted fig trees. I have about 7 fig trees in buckets. If you go in my yard now, you see fig trees and persimmons. You can't even get through my porch, if you want to call it a porch, anymore. It's just like wood and plants and pots. And really, that whole experience really just took me back to wanting to provide for Yakalo. And so now Yakalo, he is 14 years old now. He's 14 years old now, and one thing that is just so remarkable about, again, his resilience and just knowing that just, 12 years ago, he was laying and he wasn't able to breathe. He was on his bed, and then now he's able to explore and experiment with foods. He thinks he's the best cook in the house. He thinks he's the best everything in the house. And what that really does, and it just shows me how our own faith and, between myself and my wife and our refusal to just accept the sentence that the doctors had given us when they told us that if he does not take these medications right here, which, by the way, some of the medications had things he was allergic to. And so if he does not take these, he'll probably die in the next year or so. And this is what doctors told us. And so right now he's here, and he's not on any medications, and he's on the path of the same foodways and the things that we've grown up in. So, and it's just been a remarkable journey. And I'll say a little bit before I leave out about his name. Yakalo is a word, it's actually an Eritrean name and word, and it means God is able. And so in just thinking about his life and his journey and our own journey as a family with food, and knowing that, yes, God is able, and our faith in believing that we could make this happen and live naturally, that we could overcome these obstacles and, correct and heal our family with food. Thank you.
Yes, let's give it up for Gio. And we're really excited that Gio can join us. Welcome, Gio, and thank you for this amazing story. I really love the resiliency that came through, especially this year. It feels like Yakalo and God is able, and it's amazing that he's 14 now. As a mother, it really spoke to me. And as someone who also has food allergies, I can only imagine how difficult it was to not know what to feed your son to keep him alive, especially when he was so young. How did it feel to share such a personal story about your family and son in particular?
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, well, first off, yeah, thank you all. Thank you all for having us in this amazing experience to even be able to share our stories. Yakalo, it's really been a challenge, because even from that point, well, going back, we had actually two sons who had some overlapping allergies, but they had different allergies. So it was Giacomo, but then we also had another who also was experiencing the same thing. So it was a little bit from both sides, and just telling the story. It was very, 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 cathartic in a way, because I mean, there was a point years ago where I couldn't make it through talking about the story without choking up. Like I would, because it was, that was the beginning really of that road. And over the years, there would be many more hospitalizations. There would be lots of more scares and things. So that was kind of like the beginning of the road for us. And so, like I say, it would be very challenging to Tara, but to be able to put that together and be able to share that, and just our experience of how we do that really helps to kind of shed a light. And like you say, it was like a good release of like, yes. And for him to be able to sit there and witness that was an amazing experience as well.
Great. Well, I would love to know from your thoughts, and as a pharmacist, like how you think the healthcare system needs to shift and change for kids like yours so that no one else has to go through what you went through. And especially, how can what is your advice for parents to advocate for their children to change their food and whole body chemistry, especially without medications, and especially for those that might not have $8 to buy a young.
Right, we didn't either.
Oh,
Make it happen. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's like it's a multi-level. It's a lot of ways we can approach like that, because there's a larger conversation of parents. At the end of the day, it comes down to, as a parent, your child, and you understand, even if you don't have the terminology and the words from the experience, when something is off, when they're feeling. So just your own observation in itself. And I think that the wisdom of parents and that know-how and that observation is sometimes taken for granted, and things that we may know, but then luckily for myself at that point, I dove off into a path that kind of equipped me with the vocabulary and the understanding to be able to articulate that at experiences later, when we would, work with doctors, where that can be a challenge if like there's kind of this understanding where you're kind of outside of medical terminology if you don't really know what. So that's kind of one aspect of really parents really just being able to advocate and feel comfortable having the knowledge to be able to, if there is an issue, to be able to express that to a doctor. Sometimes there's the fear of some type of rebuttal from physicians, but you really want to have an open relationship with your physician if you can, and find that. So that's kind of one piece of it, but it's really a larger picture of also, it's the fact that there are possible alternatives, and then on the flip side that institutions at a larger or as a whole could be more open. And there is some way that has been made, as more of the alternative therapies, and from nutrition to the acupuncture and things, which are a lot more mainstream now, but still there's some bit of a distrust over that there are potential other options, especially when we get to a case where it's very severe, and when we're working with some of the therapies and such which are being suggested, which they aren't helping, and so that's when you really want to start looking at some of the other alternatives, and you want those alternatives to be welcomed and accepted as part of the conversation, and not shunned and looked down on.
And is that something that you do with your practice, and really making sure that it's more culturally competent? Because I know, maybe some of us haven't grown up with having needles in our
Right.
and don't know about the many centuries of acupuncture. Have you found that it really heals? I loved how you talked about that there's so many food allergies post 2000. Why do you think that is?
It's lots of, it's lots of theories. A lot of it comes from more, you see suggestions of environmental changes, and we can go through the whole list of from climate change on down, pollutants, toxins, from that level. There's been, not to, invite her, but it's part of that conversation. Like, was it part some of the childhood vaccinations that were causing it, the increase in? So you have these type of conversations, and it's a very challenging, even on that second one alone, it's a very challenging conversation. Like, for example, when you have a person like a Yacalo who does have who can't get it because of his history with things with, so he's not in a position to be able to get. So you do have these types of cases that are real, that exist because of his hospital history. And so people with particular immune, either suppressed or very compromised immune systems and things like this. But this, I think that I just feel it's important, again, going back to that advocacy piece.
Yeah, and I really also loved your description of G Papa and Mama and the fig jam and the food of your grandparents and healthy food ways. How can we get some of the figs and food that you described, and what does your son like to cook with you?
Oh, so I mean, he likes to cook, and his favorite is probably pancakes. The pancakes was a long time because we couldn't do the wheat for so long, but we found like different, flour combinations, and so that exists now. We found, some that we would purchase and just try some, see like, no, this is way too chalky. This doesn't work. So we found the nice, kind of through experimentation and finding a nice formula. So he loves to make the pancakes, definitely, as far as his favorite thing. But as far as the other part of the question, I think that um, I mean it's really it's a challenge in terms of getting for people to understand that how these different alternatives, how they can be, and then for one seeing a black man in this space, where that's one, to be in spaces and being able to share, going in community spaces. The majority of my practice has always been community based, just for the reasons so that it can be accessible to communities who wouldn't be able to do so. There's lots of pieces as far as practitioners and those of us on the healer side, and how do we choose to be in service to the community, and how do and you make the sacrifices and do what you can to help to expose and get people, one, make it affordable and accessible, and with that, then that extends to even to the gardening, and so, like you say, being able to garden and grow in community spaces where people can get the figs and the fruit and some of the peas and collard greens, which is a lot of the work this summer has really been a lot of that.
That's awesome. Um, yeah, was there any stigma? You said that your family down south has a long history of farming and that you were the first generation off the farm and now you're coming back to agriculture. Were they really supportive of you? Did they teach you how to farm, or especially in this different, like more urban environment?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
lots of support, lots of support. I would definitely say so. Definitely, so particularly from my father, because one, he grew up, learning from his dad, and so even though we lived, 800 miles apart, when we, had the opportunity to get a home, years ago, one of the first things he did was come out. He flew out, and then we planted some peppers and tomatoes together. That was like one of the first kind of like, it was like a rites of passage, if you will. But and from that, I've been able to pick his brain and bring back like memories and things he didn't even remember. I asked like, hey, and it could be unrelated to any, I don't have any chickens or anything, like, tell me about chickens. Hey, tell me about this. And I can get, and so I've been in a fortunate space to be able to even document and record a lot of those interviews and talk to them. And so to make sure that those pieces of information, because there's so many things around on the conversation of herbs. Like, I hear stories about how my grandmothers could go off into the bush and woods and knew all that. And a lot of that, unfortunately, didn't get passed down. But I find that because of myself and coming from a large family, there's a lot of support that there's someone, who is going in this path. And I have, some of my younger cousins and stuff who are, I talk to, are kind of leaning and interested. So hopefully I can get everybody on board.
yeah, I love that it's a whole family affair. In the exhibition, Food for the People, even the famous Frederick Douglass, whose house is nearby the museum and was raised locally in Talbot County, Maryland, he talks about, yes, the trauma that he received when he was enslaved on the plantation, but then also just the beauty and genius of his grandmother, Betsy, who was a gardener, a fisherwoman, and really was known for touching her plants and having good luck, and that her touch was needed to make them grow. So I thought that was such a beautiful part that like when you talked about being that weird person who touches trees and plants, and maybe could you talk a little bit about this ancestral relationship to plants, especially as like Black and Indigenous people who we know a lot about the trauma that, you know, when we were forced to work, but also this other history that we don't talk as much about.
No, definitely, and just I think in that trauma piece, and I think that a lot of the disconnect. I mean, I'm sure that we we speculate that much of that disconnect to us growing our own foods, and our that connection to land and such that trauma is a large piece of that. When we speak of descendants of Africans and indigenous, like this connection and this relationship with land and growing is one that for many people's families is one that has a long history of oppression and trauma. And so even for a lot of those who chose to split and go away from that when the opportunity came to leave and not be within those, in which it was a much harsher, like we like to romanticize the beauty of the gardening and farming, but it's hard work. Like people who get into the work know that this is labor. Like you got some sun up and sundown days, like when it needs to get done. And so that trauma piece is a large part of it. But from that, what I've learned is, for one, my own path through herbs brought me back to the foods that my grandparents grew. And so really what I focus on in any gardens, like particularly if I'm able to go into space and grow, I started growing the plants and compiling as long of a list as possible of the plants that my grandfathers grew. So the fig was one of those, the black-eyed peas. There's particular sweet potatoes and type of speckled lima beans and things that I particularly sought out because I know from working with plants, I'm not just kind of roughly like I am the woo-woo kind of plant person. Like I'm out there and I engage at a level of consciousness in that space with my plants. And so there's particular memories I mean, it's hard to describe, but just from working and growing the plants, things that, knowledge about things, it's really a process of unfolding. And it's like when you taste, it's different from when you have black-eyed peas, which are great when someone cooks it, or you just buy it from the bag. When you've grown the black-eyed peas and have sat with the plants and watched them during the warmest season and watched them and you've hauled the peas and you cook them, there's something in that interaction with the soil, with the plant, with the sunlight over that season that there's certain knowledges and there's certain flavors, certain things that you just need to taste. Like if your grandparents ate it a lot, eat it, try it and see, what you like, or to find some rendition of it and have it because it's going to awaken things within you. And so that's really the ancestral piece. And it makes me want to learn more about those plants just from those insights.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Some of the other stuff that's in the exhibition that I hope people can see is that there's also a DC government produce RX program, and places like Martha's Table has something called Joyful Markets program that have students like really get free produce and learn about it and learn how to heal. And I wish there were more of those kinds of programs. I would love to hear from you. I know we're kind of limited on time. What kind of things excite you about food in the DC area, whether they're restaurants, vendors, healing programs, and that maybe some shout outs and recommendations for us?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as far as like food spaces, like, I have an interesting, like because of kind of the history of what kind of even led to the stories, like it was a wonderful time, and kind of segue into the answer is really about when we were faced with many of the allergies and such, it required us to really step our cooking game up and get experimental and try new things. And so instead of looking at it as, okay, we can't eat this, really allowed us to explore and find chickpea flour and sweet potato flour and all these other, from a flour standpoint, just these other things to really try and experiment with. But because of that, myself, my wife, we got good cooking the stuff that we liked that everyone could eat. And so we didn't really go out and have that, experience. But then later on, within the past few years, branching out, but there's kind of the staple places as far as like markets, like definitely Glut. That's one place that definitely that I frequent a lot. That's I really love just going there, just like, just the vibe. It's just a very, kind of reminds me of a place back home in Milwaukee that I used to attend, and so or go to. So we have that definitely. I like Sinbad, like a lot of the vegan places. that we found that were very, that were accessible, that we could eat. Definitely Everlasting Life, in DC. I haven't had a chance to check out Naijha's place yet, but I can't wait because I'm not in Baltimore much, but hopefully sometime soon we'll be able to check out the vegans. I have been to the festival, but, really looking at the vegan, which worked for us. There's Sweet Natural. That's another place near the gut that we really like as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Gio. Is there anything else that you'd like to add that you weren't able to talk about in the story? Or we have
Uh,
to keep in touch
No,
with
no, no. The story pretty much told it all. It's been a wonderful journey, and I guess I will just leave that. It's a very positive. It's like, in spite of all of those challenges, it pushed everyone to want to learn, to grow more, to become, like, to expand our palettes. And now we feel so much comfortable. Like, it's a different world, and nothing. So we wouldn't be here without those challenges, but if you happen to have young kids and that is an experience, be experimental. Just, take them and go full in the things that they can eat, or the things that you find. Just keep trying and trying. You'll, find the things that work for you and your own health.
Thank you, Gio. Great. So we're gonna transition now to our vegan queen. Naijha Wright-Brown was introduced to gardening, farming, environmentalism, sustainability, and the basics of healthy eating while spending summers in Massachusetts as a teenager. A native of New York, she was born in Manhattan's Lower East Side and raised in the South Bronx. She holds a MBA in business, yet the thought of owning a restaurant never crossed her mind until she relocated to Baltimore and met her husband, Chef Greg, and they opened the Land of Kush. Naijha is the co-creator of the Vegan Soul Fest and Maryland Vegan Restaurant Week. She's the executive director of Black Vegetarian Society of Maryland. You can subscribe to her YouTube channel and Instagram handle at Naijha Speaks. So we're gonna play her video right now and then get into conversation.
Years younger than my daughter is now. Okay. Peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My mom sent me to summer camp when I was 6 years old. So I was, 3 years younger than my daughter is now. She's 9 years old. This would be my first experience outside of the New York City area. So a New York City housing project kid from the Bronx was going places. Woo! I remember waiting with a lot of other younger kids at this bus terminal to get on this big gray bus. Biggest bus that I've ever seen in my life. So we were all waiting to get on this bus. We finally get on the bus, and it was like the longest ride of my life. It took forever. But during that journey, what I could see was trees and more trees, and then grass and more trees. I saw animals outside of the zoo. What? Now, I was used to seeing dogs and cats and squirrels, but you're talking about cows, horses, and deer. Oh my! This is the big time. We're really going places now. So we finally get to our destination, and I'm really excited. So we landed smack dead in Great Barrington, Massachusetts, and all the kids get out the bus, and then you see people taking kids away, and they're going off in cars, and I'm waiting, like, when is someone gonna choose me? And then next thing you know, family comes up. This is the type of camp where, no, you're not dropping your kids off at this central location and, they're gonna go play softball and do all these other things. No, they're gonna be with a family for 2 weeks in their home. And this was the type of camp this was. So I went in the car with this family, and our first stop was Friendly's, a full-service restaurant. Yeah, someone actually waited on you. Back at home, Burger King and McDonald's was full service to us. So I can't tell you anything about the menu. All I can tell you is they had great ice cream sundaes. I enjoyed the ice cream sundae. So we take back off in the car after we leave, and then we go to their house. They really had a house. It wasn't like a 14-story building. You know, I lived on the 9th floor where I'm from. They had a real house, 2 levels, not including the basement and the attic. I'm like, whoa, this is freedom. I felt like we could do anything in this house. I was just like, okay, I can't wait for this 2 weeks. Right outside, they had a river where we would walk barefooted. Now, come on now, you know you can't walk barefooted in a city, man. I'm like, yo, we're walking barefooted to the river. What? I learned how to swim in this freezing cold river. So, you know I know how to take cold showers, right? Right? So, I'm just telling you, this place was fantastic. So, you know I'm not thinking about home, right? Let me get to the food. We're talking about fresh breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day. I'm talking about straight out of the garden right in their backyard. Like the whole backyard was a garden. I'm like, what? This is ridiculous. We're actually picking our own string beans, our own items for salad, whatever it is that we needed to put in salad, the carrots, the cucumbers. I'm talking about these things were huge. And we were prepping this stuff for dinner. I'm 6 years old. I'm used to seeing, no, I don't think y'all get, do you know how it feels to pick your own food, corn from the field, string beans, off the strawberries? Come on, berries off the bushes, and you're just eating it. Like, it was like food forever, like the food paradise. So I'm like, hey, I'm living here. This is my home now. Because back at home, if you think of corn on the cob, you're either getting it frozen, half pieces, whole pieces, or you're getting it kerneled in the can or cream of corn. Now, string beans, 2 selections, cut string beans or French style. Come on now, my can people know what I'm talking about. That's what you're getting. Everything that we ate at home came packaged in boxes, in bags, or some type of plastic wrapping. That's how we were eating back in the Bronx. So I was just having fun at this place. I would go to this camp every year for the next 6 years. Back and forth, back and forth. And as I got older, I would notice a lot of different things. One of them, finances. This was a self-employed family. Both husband and wife had their own positions, freelancing. The husband was an architect, and the wife was an artist, an oil painter, and she just painted art and things like that. Finances, fresh food, fresh air, freedom, literally walking outside of the door and taking advantage of all the nature-driven activities just at your leisure. You wasn't doing that in the housing projects in New York City, okay? We locking 12 locks, and then something else on the door. I'm like, okay, are they really gonna get in after all of that? So what I took from this family, and there's another thing that I noticed. When you get older, especially when you're reaching puberty, so you're talking about from 6 to age 12. So I'm becoming 12, I'm noticing my body, things are changing. I was never constipated in camp. So, I mean, and I didn't get it until later in life, but I was never constipated. At home, major constipation. And maybe it had something to do with the mayonnaise sandwiches that I was eating or the white sugar that I was licking off my hand straight, you know, from the bag. I don't know what it was, but when I went to camp, I never had an issue. So it was just a lot of things. This family had a lasting impression on my life. I'm like, seriously, to the point where when I was 19, I became entrepreneurial. I, was selling skincare products, and then I went off to start my own comedy entertainment company. Why? Because despite whatever I was going through in that New York City housing project in the Bronx, I wanted to be happy. And this place made me happy. And wherever I could find that happiness, I made it happen. Comedy made me happy. So I laughed. I hung around people that were happy and was filled with laughter. And then as I got older, that health thing really got into me. You know, I ran into some health problems when I turned 33, that pizza and cholesterol, cake, all of that, ice cream. I had to get my cholesterol down. So coming to Baltimore, I met my husband, Mr. Gregory Brown, and learned about this lifestyle of veganism. So you know what I did? I helped them grow the Land of Kush, Vegan Soul Bistro, 10 years in business, and we still rocking it, award winning. Serving up the celebrities. Then, when I got bored with that, because I get bored really easy, starting the first Vegan Soul Fest in the inner city of Baltimore. Vegan Soul Fest and Baltimore Vegan Restaurant Week, which is now Maryland Vegan Restaurant Week. And I gotta meet people where they are, you know? I'm a people person. So Black Veg Society meets you where you are on your journey towards plant-based and vegan living. And we are targeting the BIPOC communities because you know who has the highest health disparities? That's us. So we're gonna meet you where you are on your journey towards better living, healthier living. And you know one thing? The one thing that you need to learn in life, and if you don't get anything else out of this story, is influence. Your circle of influence matters. I don't care if you're coming from the projects. I don't care if you're coming from the slums in another country. Your circle of influence matters, and what you do with that influence surely matters. And the influence can be as simple as opening up your gardens to someone who has never been in one before. Thank you.
Yes, let's give it up for Naijha. Yes, I love your energy and enthusiasm and this origin story of how you learned about rural land, animals, and natural food. You really make me hungry right now. I want food from that garden. And now you're a business owner and of the award-winning vegan restaurant Land of Kush and founder of Vegan Soul Festival. Can you talk more about how this experience with a farm as a kid led you to a lifetime of healthy food, activism, cooking, and cultural creation, especially for urban and low-income communities like the one you came from?
Yeah, I have to thank my mom. My mom just didn't want me to be subject to just the surroundings. And I see it now in Baltimore. There's some folks that haven't even been on the east side or the west side. And I can't comprehend that because where I come from, we were traveling. And I think that had to do with me being so young and sent out into foreign land, I would say. Um, it was an experience. Again, I talked about the level of freedom. You know, in the project, you just wasn't going outside like that. You were staying in front of the building, you had to be washed, and you were upstairs, you know, when the lights went out. Whereas out in the Berkshires in Massachusetts, we were walking down the road, we were setting up, you know, lemonade stands, we were bike riding miles away from where we were and just exploring the grounds in terms of the garden. And my understanding of farming then and what was going on, because I had the opportunity to milk cows and pick eggs. As a vegan now, I can comprehend what the concern is all about. Now, having not been in that experience, you know, you can only rely on documentaries, but I know firsthand what was going on farm. So it really was an experience, a really good experience, and exposed me to a lot of different things, and would help me grow and become the person who I am, especially the family I was connected with.
That's good. In the exhibition, Food for the People, we start with the line food justice is not just access to fresh foods, but foods that help sustain cultural traditions and food cultures, that food connects us to our families, our communities, and our heritage, and access to foods is vital. And so I really hear this reverberating throughout your story. How are you helping create food access to cultural food traditions, especially food rooted in your Black and Afro Latino food cultures, that has helped you lower your cholesterol and all of that? Could you talk a little bit more about the cultural connections?
Yeah. You know, when I was trying to lower my cholesterol. I didn't even know what to do because I had to figure out what it was that had cholesterol. So, once I did the research and found out the butter, and if you were cooking with lard or whatever it is we were frying foods in, meeting my husband Greg and learning about the vegan lifestyle, that's the first thing that you look at is, wow, none of this has cholesterol. So, this is, and I knew this, you're exposed to it when you're young, but it doesn't carry with you. It clicks later on. And I'm like, wow, like, why didn't I put two and two together? And that's why I talk about the circle of influence. After I finished with camp, that circle of influence changed. I'm working on the Wall Street, Park Avenue. You're around different people. They're eating all different type of things, going to different restaurants, steakhouses and things like that, shrimp scampi, surf and turf. And then, the world hit me when I was 33 and was going to be prescribed meds. I said, this is not an option. I have to find out. I have to connect back to, those roots. So in helping my husband, working with my husband, bringing Land of Kush to Baltimore, it was real simple. It didn't have to be complicated. We didn't need exotic stuff, collard greens without the turkey and turkey neck and all that stuff, mac and cheese without, this eggs and cow's cheese or whatever, animal cheese. Let's make our own cheese, cholesterol free. Yams, we don't have to put these marshmallows in it, knowing that the origination is from the pig. So just keeping it simple, making it tasty, and bringing it into the market, and showing people that this is really good food. You don't have to put animal products into it. Sauce is the boss, and you season it like you would season anything else, because what is seasoning? Plants.
Yeah, I think that's great. And you mentioned that you have a 9-year-old daughter now who's a little bit older than the age you were when you first went to camp. How have you taught her I don't know if she's gone to camp, or how has she experienced like farming and agriculture?
Well, it's different this day and age, and my mother says it all the time. Back then, setting kids away to camp, you wasn't thinking about all of this, perverted stuff that's going on. So obviously, as a parent now, I'm a little bit more, overprotective of her, but she's been vegan since the womb. So what I will say about that is, in parenting and teaching your children how to eat, it starts at that age. A lot of times you see parents and it's soda and it's sugary drinks and things. She's drinking water. She's drinking, freshly squeezed lemons, brewed tea, and not even a lot of that. It's mostly water. She's taking water to school with her, or lunch to school. And she's willing to try different things. Very picky eater, but she's open to trying new things, because that's what we teach. There's a plethora of vegetables and fruits and grains and all type of things that we try when we're cooking, and she's open to all of that. And I'm happy that she's been raised in this lifestyle, because she doesn't like sweets. The chips, it's kind of hard, but she's not a big sweet candy. So I don't got to worry about Halloween and all that other stuff, because she doesn't want it. And that's how she's been brought up. So definitely different from when I was coming up. No dairy, no milk, no constipation.
It's true. I really love that you talk about, you're real about it, right? Like, these foods, we can't necessarily fully process them, and that's what causes us constipation and other things. And the discrepancy between these whiter areas, even in DC, we talk about in our exhibition that in wards 2 and 3, some of the whitest and wealthiest wards have many different grocery stores. Despite having a small population of 27%, they have 16 grocery stores, while in wards 7 and 8, which are majority African American and working class and are home to 23%, kind of equivalent, right? They only have 3 stores, and found that some people, there's only one store, Giant, in Ward 8, and they have to go back and forth for over an hour each, and lots of people don't have access to cars. And like, what does it mean when we don't have even access to stores, grocery stores, let alone farmers markets and healthy stuff? I would love to know like the kinds of changes you would like to see in our DC, Baltimore area that could address this.
Well, before we get to the changes, I'd like to get some honest answers as why this is an issue. I've even when I go back to the Bronx, my mother has a fine fare right down the block that she can walk to. Now we've had a supermarket up the block from us, and no, it didn't have the most healthiest food in that supermarket, but we could walk to that supermarket. Now today, there's a market literally right outside her door, fresh produce. You can get some vegan options. Like, why isn't this happening in DC? What are the answers? Like, someone has to know something, because these type of decisions are made for specific reasons. So what is the reason why that's an issue? Why aren't there supermarkets in reach where people can transport to them really easy? I interviewed a gentleman on my show not too long ago who is going to be collaborating with local bodegas and corner stores and trying to see how he can work with them to get more options, more healthier options into their stores. I was in Brooklyn for Black Veg Fest in August, and I was afraid of that situation, that I wasn't going to find a lot of healthy stuff at bodegas and corner stores. But to my surprise, I found places that had plant-based milk and vegan options. So it is possible. Is the people have to they got to speak up about it, and they have to want it, and they have to work with these stores and get it in the neighborhood. But again, it starts with the answers. Why is this an issue?
That's great. I would love to know, as we're on that, what are some places besides Land of Kush? We definitely put a shout out that you would like to acknowledge that do exist right now in our communities. So in the Baltimore area or DC, that, whether it's grocery stores or restaurants or farm.
Well, let me start with Baltimore. I would divert it to folks that are participating in the Maryland Vegan Restaurant Week. So if you go to mdveganeats.com, those would be my picks. So I don't want to pick and choose anyone, because I don't want anyone to beat me up. So in August and February, we have the Maryland Vegan Restaurant Week. If you go to that website, I would say, anyone on there is doable. For DC, I like going to Farewell for breakfast, Farewell on 8th Street, and then Everlasting Life. Gio mentioned them. It's now new vegan. It's across the street from Howard University on Georgia Avenue. That's definitely my go-to when I want lunch and dinner. We shop at Mom's in Baltimore. My husband does all of the food shopping, the majority of it. So it's Mom's, and we have Whole Foods in the area too. So, but Mom's is my favorite.
That's great. And is there anything else that you'd like to add, and how our listeners can be in touch with you? I see your Naijha Speaks behind you. And you incorporate comedy and all of your entrepreneurship. How can we keep in touch?
Naijha Speaks, definitely. You go to naijaspeaks.com. I'm actually interviewing someone tomorrow about the raw food summit that's coming up. I like to connect with people. I'm a people person. I like to expose the underexposed and get people more information. That's really the most I like to share. Definitely follow me and learn a lot. I'm trying to help people reach their true vegan soul, whether you're going to go 100% vegan or you're going to go plant-based. We're going to touch into that soul, and we're going to use other people's stories, just like you're doing here on this platform. And I appreciate the opportunity that you gave me to do that. Let's just keep doing it. I mean, we got a long ways to go. Health is wealth, and people have to feel comfortable with what they eat. Don't be afraid to try things. You're not going to like everything. I don't like everything, but the point of the matter is try to eat more healthier, get more fresh fruits and vegetables on your plate, and not too much of this starch and meaty stuff. It's not good for us. cardiovascular disease is still the number one killer, and it's not going on anywhere, and it's going to still be there when COVID is gone. So yeah, we got to do something about it. Yeah, you're muted, Sage.
There we go. That's part of the, the Zoom universe. Thank you so much, Naijha. It's been a pleasure. And we have one more version of Stories for Change, the food edition, number 3 on next Wednesday from 6:30 to 7:30. And you can register in advance. And then please sign up for our newsletter here. It's been a pleasure to speak to both of you, Naijha and Gio. And please keep us abreast of any stories that are coming up. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.